And we actually right on time this time, which is amazing. Hopefully we'll keep to this, but I doubt it. But hey, we can only dream.
We've been doing this for a year, and this is the first time it's been on time.
I know. It's amazing. We actually even beat the communication from LinkedIn saying your event's live. So we just a tad bit early. So kudos to us. And if you're expecting us to be the norm, please, we set the bar high. Yeah, it's not going to be great from here. But anyway.
Hi, everyone.
Thanks.
Welcome.
Yeah, so welcome to everyone. This month's October session. So we actually also even a bit more prepared. Well, Lisa's a bit more prepared. I have been swamped with work and I've just not been very organized. But thanks to Lisa, she's put out the topics even for this session tonight. I think you posted them on Twitter, Threads, and LinkedIn. Is that correct?
Something like that. I've lost track of the platform situation that's going on. I seem to have more social media than I did this time last year, so I don't really understand how that's happened, but there we go.
Yeah, it's hard to keep track. But yeah, thanks to Lisa for putting those out. As I said, a lot more organized than I am. So yeah, the three topics that we're going to cover, we've got a fourth one just in case, but I don't think we'll have time for that one. And yeah, hi Rafe and Rich, good to see you. Thanks for coming along. So with that, we're going to kick off for the first topic. You want to kick it off, Lisa?
Yeah, so a bit of an interesting development, I guess, for all of us. So the Red Cross, through a piece of work that they did, decided to put out, I think it was 8 rules of engagement for hacktivists in armed conflict. So it's really important to differentiate between these rules are not for hacktivists per se, they are for hacktivists in the context of an armed conflict. That's the use of them. So it's not for like animal rights activists and stuff like that. So they put these rules of engagement out, and a lot of people obviously criticized them and off the bat, as you'd imagine. And I think for me, before we sort of get into them, I think it's a really positive start, because at the moment there's chaos. And just to kind of set the scene, because I was saying to Sean earlier, I kind of went down a research rabbit hole on this one. And uncovered things that I wish I had not uncovered, to be perfectly honest, as rabbit holes often tend to be the case. So I was looking at hacktivist activity, and especially mapping it to conflict. So looking at the Russia-Ukraine conflict, and then obviously looking at the Israel-Palestinian conflict that we're currently seeing play out. Now, obviously, most of the stuff around Russia-Ukraine has been discussed to death. We know the main players in that, such as the IT Army of Ukraine, Killnet, Anonymous Sudan, all of whom have been battling it out quite publicly. But what's really interesting is when you look at this recent conflict, because we saw a really sudden kind of hornet's nest get stirred up, I suppose, since probably Sunday onwards. And one of the first things that happened actually was a non-ghost, who are a Palestinian hacktivist group, hacked into the Red Alert app. And the Red Alert app is an app that essentially warns Israelis of missile strikes against their territory. They hacked it in and exploited the API, and then started issuing fake missile warnings to people in Israel, which was quite significant, obviously, given the context. But more interestingly, it sort of shows how quickly they can move away from DDoS attacks, because typically we think of hacktivists, especially in armed conflict, and a lot of it is DDoS attacks. But these guys moved away from that. Also, then on the other side of the fence, what was really interesting was, and I'm not sure if people are familiar with them, but the Indian Cyber Army, who are quite an active hacktivist group based, unsurprisingly, in India, given their name, they sort of threw their hat in the ring in support of Israel. And they started taking out Palestinian companies, telecoms, things like that, big companies based in Palestine or owned by Palestinian people. And then what was, I suppose, slightly funny, but also interesting, was the pro-Palestinian hacktivist groups saw that happening and then attacked Indian government websites. So essentially what you sort of see is this chaos where everyone's attacking each other and pulling countries into a conflict that actually wouldn't be in a conflict, like India, not really connected too heavily in with Israel and Palestine, yet their websites get taken offline by pro-Palestinian hacktivist groups. So now there's an element of them being brought into this discussion that otherwise just wouldn't be there. So I think the chaos that gets caused is enormous.
Yeah, I mean, so I'm going to put my hands up. I don't know much about any of the hacktivists and APT groups, and I just know sometimes they're funny animals, and other times they some robots at a conference or whatever. That's an area I'm certainly not well versed on, but have some awareness of some of the ongoings, just from a very high level. So this is pretty interesting what you're saying. It's also a bit concerning how it can involve other countries, and how it could probably escalate things. I mean, if you compare like conflicts today to conflicts like in the 1940s, well, yes, they were bad. You had World War I and World War II. But now you got something called a nuclear weapon thrown into the mix, which suddenly makes things a lot more worrying about armed conflict, where you could have entire cities or countries or even the world maybe massively impacted. So, yeah, all of this really worries me. And it often just takes one misguided step or something to trigger just a catastrophic sequence of events. We've seen it like during the Cold War with things like the Cuban Missile Crisis, and there were some really, 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 really close calls where it just took one person to just make that split decision, and thankfully they decided to be in kind of Dartits or something. I think there was the one instance where it was a fake alarm or whatever, but looked real. And if they pressed that button, who knows what would have happened. So my worry is we see something similar, like if a hacktivist group maybe unknowingly or unknowingly triggers something that then suddenly escalates.
And I think that was the driving force behind these rules of engagement, because I think the issue is that it's almost kind of democratized. I hate the phrase democratized warfare, but it's essentially that's what it's done. It's allowed people for the first time ever in history to get involved in some level and actually bring countries in and actually cause disruption and actually change the narrative at a political level that historically you would never have been able to do, because you'd have needed guns and tanks, and it just wouldn't have been feasible for individuals to do it. But now we're in a different world and that can happen. And I think this is really interesting with all of these. I mean, obviously we're seeing like pro-Iranian groups getting stuck in this conflict, and then anti-Iranian groups getting stuck in back at them. And it sort of brings everyone together into this really horrible kind of hornet's nest of hackers that is really just chaotic. So the Red Cross brought out these rules, and I won't go through them. There's 8 of them. I did a whole massive post on LinkedIn about them. So if you're interested, you can go look at them there. But essentially, some of them I had a bit of an issue with. One of them was the first one, which was do not direct cyber attacks against civilian objects. Now, a whole purpose of hacktivism, in my opinion, is disruption, is causing huge amounts of disruption to a society. I'm not agreeing with it, but I'm saying that's the MO. So when you look at these rules and you realize that really we don't have any ability to catch these people from a law enforcement perspective, right? Zero ability to do that. So in order for these rules to work or have any sort of bite to them, they need cooperation from. And so therefore these hacktivist groups have to be involved in the narrative, and they have to be involved in agreeing them and deciding on them. And they're never going to do that if you say you can't hit civilian targets, because what are they going to hit? I mean, I know Killnet did NATO, or stole some stuff from NATO, but apart from that, for the vast majority, it's power stations, it's telecoms plants, it's TV stations. It's not military targets.
But the other side, you also got to look at who some of these hacktivist groups are. Like, they morals and principles, some of them are going to have zero. So they're not going to care. Oh, we're going to target civilians. Oh, well, whatever. Click. And I mean, just see what happened on the weekend and what's going on now. Ultimately, the ones suffering are civilians from both sides. I mean, what happened on Saturday was absolutely horrendous. And I'm sure what's happening now is just as I'm not going to equate like bad or worse, or whatever, but it's still civilians suffering as well, which is terrible. And you're going to have people openly support some of those actions. So they're not going to care about civilians. Civilians are the last thing on their mind. So it is. I get what you're saying. Like that kind of those things are. There's no real rules of engagement in cyber warfare. Let's face it. No. Who monitors it? There's no like way to monitor it or making sure that you control it and whatever. It's like whatever's there's game. And most often we rely on morals and principles, but unfortunately some out there, as we've seen time and time again, ignoring conflict, targeting children's hospitals and that. We've seen people just don't care.
Yeah.
And I think one of the problems with is if you take warfare, it's still very personal. You're doing it up, maybe it's not always up front, but you kind of seeing what's happening in real time, if that makes sense. Whereas like cyber warfare, you could be across the world. It's totally often closed off from you. So you don't actually get to see the repercussions of what you actually doing or the consequences, or even get to live with them. So I think that's maybe also got to bear in as well.
There was another rule. So actually, funnily enough, rule number 2, which was to be perfectly clear, I think this is a good first start to have some discussion and start building this out. I'm not at all sort of hating on them for what they've done. I think it was a good first sort of step. The second rule, though, it says, do not use malware or other tools or techniques that spread automatically and damage military objectives and civilian objects indiscriminately. I mean, to be perfectly honest, we haven't seen a lot of history of people using malware and being able to control it really well. That's the whole problem with cyber as a weapon. It's very, very difficult to control what it impacts.
Yeah, it's like, if you compare it, it's like the World War II bombing, where they did carpet bombings. There wasn't very targeted means of bombing, so they just flattened everything inside. So malware is kind of the same at the moment, where you can't just go, well, that malware target that box over there, like a cruise missile or something like that. Maybe it will eventually get to that point at some stage, but yeah.
I mean, the ones that we've seen, obviously, we always hear people cite Stuxnet, but Stuxnet is a really beautiful example of how something that was developed in an incredibly sophisticated way, in a way that probably far exceeds the ability of most hacktivist groups, and was deployed and was completely out of control. Nobody had any ability to stop it. It spread around the world. And I think that highlights the problem with it, because you have to make it aggressive enough to be able to get through defenses and spread throughout a network. But if you make it too aggressive, it spreads everywhere. So, and I think also the thing you've got to remember with hacktivist groups is they're not states. They're not limited by international law. They're not bound. They're not going to end up in The Hague if something goes really horribly wrong, right? So they don't really have to care, to be honest. And if you need their cooperation in this, I think the rules will be watered down to the extent you might get them to agree to things like don't hit hospitals, possibly. But I'm not sure how much further they would go. That said, Killnet initially did say that they would abide by these rules for whatever that's worth. I mean, we'll see what happens with that, because it's Killnet. I'm not really sure how much we want to put a bet on that. But then, yet again, they have got stuck in at this conflict. They've said that they are not pro-Palestine, but they're anti-NATO and therefore anti-Israel, apparently, or something. I don't know. So I just think the problem is you can operate in these groups with complete immunity. No one knows who you are. No one knows where you are. No one's going to arrest you. No one's going to find you. There's really not an awful lot to pull you to a code of conduct. And as Dan Card said, actually, these groups have codes of conduct. That's the whole problem. They have kind of mission statements and stuff like that within their own groups that cause us a lot of this problem.
Yeah. Well, as I said, there's no honor among thieves. And I think the other problem is that some of these groups may see opportunity. So they may not, like the Killnet you mentioned, they're probably not really swayed one way or the other. But it benefits them for their own goals. So now they're using this as a means to get to their own goal, which makes it even worse, because now you just got this, as you said at the beginning, there's just this giant mess of stuff, and there's a lot of people in the way, like directly in the conflict and outside of the conflict. You already mentioned India. Goodness knows how many other countries are going to be affected by this. Yeah. My worry is, will it then result in really negative consequences for people, ordinary people?
Well, yeah, because ultimately, like you said, like if someone takes, we'll use India as an example, if someone takes an Indian power plant offline in revenge for something this Indian cyber army did, then that now affects this conflict that happened in a localized area, now affects people in India without the desire of the Indian government, without the desire of anybody really, other than these hacktivist groups. And so I do think we need rules. I do think we need something that we get them to agree to on some level in terms of limiting this, because at the moment it's chaos. And the Russia-Ukraine thing was chaos. However, this recent conflict, the Palestine-Israel issue, it's just unbelievable. Like the groups involved, I've got literally a book here, written notebook full of names of groups and who has attacked who, and that's since Saturday. That's not even a week, and we've got this immense quantity of really quite serious attacks that have happened from all sorts of groups who are just not actually linked necessarily to this conflict. So I definitely think we need order. I'm not sure what the solution is. I think this is a great starting point. I think we as a community need to discuss it more and start thinking about how this could work. I don't think this iteration is the right iteration, but yeah, I mean, if you have suggestions and you've got a fix for it, stick it in the chat.
Well, my personal view is I think it's a lost cause. I'm Debbie Downer, negative dad, whatever you want to call me. I just think that if you go view these people who are doing this, they don't really care. You know, like anarchists, really. Many of them are going to be anarchists, like, rules, screw rules, that kind of stuff. So they only abide by their own rules. So if you start forcing rules on them, they're not going to care. As you said, it's how we monitor and how we enforce those rules. And I don't think that's going to be all that really possible. Go look at Lazarus, the Lazarus Group, where, yeah, good luck trying to get people out of North Korea. Let me know when you win with that one. So I think it's a good idea, but in reality, I don't know. But we shall see. Hopefully I'm wrong. So we got a few comments. So Turkey's on vote for Christmas. from Cirrus Tech. Rich mentioned all it takes for one person to step outside of the guidelines, then people supporting the other side will also do the same. That is very true. Cirrus Tech said again, won't someone think of the normies? Well, it's very true. I mean, at the end of the day, we have to think of the ordinary, innocent people involved in a lot of this. The vast majority of people have nothing to do with this. They shouldn't be involved and they shouldn't suffer as a result.
Yeah.
And then Mark said, Sean's studio used to look pretty, and now it looks like mine. I got too much stuff in here. I just got a steering wheel and a telescope. I get those out of the way, it'll be all good. Cool. All right. So the next topic, I think, is very, very related to that first topic. And this is around disinformation and misinformation. How do we start tackling and how dangerous it is? I think it's important to also call out what misinformation is and disinformation is. So my understanding is misinformation is when someone accidentally gives out the wrong information. So they, for instance, think they know what they're talking about, but they're not entirely accurate or something like that. Disinformation is why someone purposely gives out incorrect information. So you're probably looking for things like propaganda and that kind of thing.
And I guess that means that if I put something out that's deliberately false and Sean sees it and he forwards it on or he retweets it, he is spreading misinformation, whereas I'm spreading disinformation. So it doesn't change necessarily. It's just the intent behind it.
The intent, But yeah, I think, I mean, we were talking about this very briefly before we joined. You saw some stuff around certain things being posted about the conflict that were entirely inaccurate. I saw something similar mentioned as well, where Hamas are posting images that are either years out of date or not even as part of the Gaza or anything that's happening there, to show like, oh, look what Israel is doing to us. And that's obviously playing in their favor. Now, we're not saying that nothing bad's happening there and that, but it is part of the essentially what I think is propaganda. So you try to get people on your side and make an enemy of your enemy type thing.
Yeah, I think so. I read a Bellingcat article on this because it's been, again, I think, even forgetting Russia, Ukraine for the moment and just thinking about this recent conflict, it's just been such a spike in activity. Both, obviously, we just talked about the hacktivists, but again, in this field of sort of propaganda, misinformation, disinformation. So they're looking at it, and they, for example, the big one that happened recently was there was a video that was put out that was from a pro-Palestinian source that said that Israel had just bombed a Greek Orthodox church. And when you look at the video, it's sort of really zoomed out. You can see kind of the city in front, but you can't really make out particular things. And you see an explosion. So obviously some missile has hit. However, Bellingcat did some research into it, and they actually found the church's Facebook page. And the church had posted like, no, we haven't been destroyed. Like, we're up, we're functional. Like, you can, like, we're open, you can come, like, whatever. It was just complete rubbish. And one of the things that was really interesting was that a lot of these videos, and they're being, just to be clear, they're being put out by the Israelis as much as they're being put out by the Palestinians. Always, it goes both. Same with Russia, Ukraine. It's going in both directions. And what's really interesting is often the videos are kind of grainy. They're kind of not great quality, zoomed out. They're moving at the shaky. There's stuff that makes it very difficult to really interrogate what you're seeing. And that, I think, lends itself to these videos being shared. The other one that was really interesting from the article was there was lots of Syrian stuff. So there was lots of stuff that was being shared from 2019 from Syria. That wasn't that, but there was this girl, this horrifying video of this young girl being burned alive that was shared as, proof that I can't remember whether it was pro-Israeli or pro-Palestinian, but regardless, the one or other of them had done this. And Bellingcat actually discovered that the video was from Guatemala in 2015, and it has actually been shared in multiple conflicts worldwide, cited as this is happening here. So it's just insane. We saw the video, you probably saw it, the video of the paragliders. Everyone was saying this was Hamas soldiers coming into Israel. It was a pro-Israeli thing. It wasn't. It was paragliders in Egypt on holiday. Like, the videos are just taken so out of context. And they made just one more point before I pass back over to you. Bellingcat made a really interesting point, and they said that all these videos are credible. So they're not manipulated. They're not AI. They are videos that are credible, that have happened somewhere in the world for the most part. That's what works the best. They're then either misconceptualized or misrepresented and told this is what's happening right now in Gaza, or this is what's happening in Tel Aviv, or whatever. And then people sort of knowingly or unknowingly share it and amplify it. But I think the worry for me is that it galvanizes anger and it galvanizes support one way or another. And I also think, and this really will be my final point, I promise, before I hand back over to you, that you're not in this situation, for example, if you're really pro-Palestinian, you're not going to buy the pro-Israeli content. You're going to probably dismiss that straight off the bat. But you're probably really liable to buy the pro-Palestinian content. And I think we've seen that in the UK as well with the Ukraine conflict. We've bought all of the pro-Ukraine stuff without questioning, and then we've questioned the Russian stuff. And I worry that what it does is it polarizes further society.
Yeah, I entirely agree, because I saw a video where there were pro-Palestinian people chanting outside. I think it was the Labour conference. They're chanting outside there, and there was one guy rightly calling out well, what about the civilians that were harmed? But there you can definitely see the polarization. There was a person on his side strongly condemned against the Palestinians, and then the Palestinians strongly condemned against Israel's. And you never get to see both sides of the story. At the end of the day, both sides suffer civilian casualty losses. That's the reality. And the thing that really makes me angry is, at the end of the day, you got people in power who hide away and they don't need to worry, right? They're not going to be harmed. It's the civilians that are ultimately the ones that are likely going to suffer the most. And this is on both sides. I mean, some of the stories I read on Saturday were absolutely horrendous. And now I'm sure there's going to be also really horrendous things happening on during this week from the airstrikes and that, and who knows what else is going to happen further. So from both sides, it's absolutely horrendous, and these propaganda things are just going to make it worse. We really need to know the truth. Oh my gosh. Sorry, we really need to know the truth about what is happening, and propaganda is certainly not helping that. I mean, there was a tweet I think VX Underground called out where someone was going on about how all these cyber attacks happened before the attack, and it was set in stone. A lot of it was just absolute pure nonsense. And I think one of the things that we also need to worry about is, so there's the propaganda, obviously from each side, but what about those people on Twitter who are then trying to look for the likes and follows, the celebrity status? They might share things or create things to get them more followers and likes. I mean, there was that. I think I saw one of the things, war grounds or something war thing, where he's basically, or they, I don't know if he or they or her, they're basically anti-Semite, but they were pretending to be a war person. And I think Elon Musk initially said, "Oh, go follow this account for all the latest details," and yeah, that turned out to be a great anti-Semite. And it's well, yeah. And those are the things that worry me. So people might do all these things to better themselves and totally ignore all of those things that are going on, unfortunately.
And I think for me as well, thinking about this whole process from a sort of analytical perspective, obviously the social media platforms really play into this, because virality and the way posts kind of grab attention and move on are shock or quick, consumable, couple seconds, big statement. And that really plays into the social media algorithm. So that's how they spread so fast, right? In terms of like spotting it, to be honest, I think in a conflict like what we're seeing now, you should be very vigilant about where you consume your information from. Consume it from proper newspapers. And that's not to say that they always get it right, but when they get it wrong, most regulators require them to publish a retraction. So at least you know that that was not correct. Consuming it just on social media is really dangerous, because for the most part, I mean, you look at what Bellingcat's been doing just with this conflict. It takes hours and hours and hours to interrogate a video and to work out whether it's true or not. And that's Bellingcat, who has resources and expertise to a level that pretty much nobody else on the planet probably does. So the thought that you think that anybody normies, as Dan Card would call them, would be able to do that is just ridiculous. So I think that's one of the problems, and we need to be more cautious with what we like, what we share, what we say anything about, because you are endorsing that piece of content to everybody who follows you if you share that. So you have to be really sure that it is what it says it is. And I think responsibility shifts them. One interesting thing, when I was in Peru have passed a really interesting law during COVID, where they actually made the sharing of misinformation and the creation of it illegal, and you can end up in jail. So if you share something that's not true, you could end up in jail in Peru, which is just insanity. But, you know, where do we end up in this situation if we don't do something about it?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, we all have a part to play. Like, as you said, just don't blindly share things. So if things don't get shared, then the information can't spread. It's a difficult one. Like, there's no one who's solved this. I mean, we've seen the likes on Twitter, the Facebook, Instagram, whatever, you name it. There's not a single platform that has managed to solve this problem. And I don't know if there is a solution to this, especially now with things like AI, and that makes it more credible to people who don't know any better.
Yeah, so I just saw the comment from Cirrus Tech saying, I wonder if we could try and use AI to debunk misinformation or have it do some OSINT, which I do think that would probably, if it's, I mean, I'm not an AI specialist, so I don't know, but I think if you could utilize it towards something positive like that, that would be brilliant. But I think really it's an almost unsolvable problem from a source perspective. I think it's just about being more in tune with ourselves and thinking there's a conflict, it's really heated, there will be misinformation, I need to be super careful of anything I share that plays into my biases. And I think that's the really key thing, because we're actually quite good at scrutinizing the other side because we don't like them. So everything's like, oh, I reckon that's rubbish or whatever. But we're not at all good at doing that for a narrative that fits ours. So I think if it perfectly fits your narrative, huge red flag, probably go and look it up, because it's probably not true.
Yeah. And also don't jump to conclusions. So last night I asked what I thought a valid question. I was making sure. So the question I asked was, with Israel blockading Gaza, I was just confused, like how that could happen when there's a border with Egypt. Like, that was my confusion. I just wanted to understand what was going on. So I asked a question. Maybe the way I phrased it, probably, as someone pointed out, was maybe a bit too blunt, but at times I just quickly write down whatever I have on my mind. And it was a genuine question. I was really interested in finding out, like, how they could just suddenly blockade when there's a border with another country. And then that person just immediately jumped to a conclusion, asked me a question, and blocked me. And I was like, okay. One, wasn't trying to cause any conflicted thing. I was just asking the question, and then people thankfully then put out some answers to that. So I now have a better understanding, and hopefully those who read the thread also have a better understanding of like what the situation is, why that's the case. Because maybe they're asking the same thing or jumping to other conclusions. Who knows?
What was the answer? I don't know the answer either.
So there were, I think, two things. So one, Israel apparently bombed the border to Egypt, and then also Egypt doesn't want to get involved.
Okay.
So, yeah. I mean, again, those could be inaccurate in that. So again, please look it up. But it does make sense. So I'm not going to take those verbatim. There were news article links in that, so those are all in that tweet. And you can go look it up and make up your own minds. But it does make sense to me, and it's not really picking a side or the other in those answers per se.
I think that's responsible, and I did that today actually, because I read the news today that 400,000 Israeli soldiers were on the Gaza border or something, ready to do a full ground invasion. And I thought, well, 400,000 sounds like an awful lot of people to me, to someone who has never been in the military. So I actually asked Phil Ingram, and I was like, can I just ask, is this a lot of people for a ground invasion or not a lot of people? Because it depends, right? I don't know what 400,000 means. Is that normal? Is that too high? Is it, it gives you a lot of idea about intent. And he gave me a great answer, which is brilliant. But like, I think there you need to have that curiosity in you, because otherwise what you do is you go, oh my God, 400,000, it means this, post it, someone shares it, someone shares it, someone shares it. Before you know it, it's a bit like, where you used to play that game in school where you used to pass it on the thing and the story change each time someone whispered it to the next person. Mm-hmm. It's a bit like that. That's essentially how it works, and you end up with this completely distorted narrative. Like I said, the video of the horrifying video of this girl that was in 2015 in Guatemala. It wasn't in Gaza. It's not in Syria. It's not in any of these. It's in Guatemala.
Yeah, it's frustrating. And hopefully, well, I know the answer. I'm not going to even say. I would say hopefully it doesn't become a worse thing, but I think we all know. Unfortunately, sometimes these things are going to turn out, especially if you consider the first point that we had, propaganda and all of that. Look how World War II happened. That was definitely propaganda, and that then and there. Unfortunately, happens throughout civilization, right? Yeah. But,
yeah, it's really difficult.
Yeah. We just got to play our part, I guess. That's the best that we can do. And unfortunately, we're not going to change the world, but we can change one tiny bit at a time.
Yeah, and I think report as well. Like, it's maybe not worth an awful lot, but you never know. Report. Yeah. You see something fake, report it, because you don't know. And if there's loads of reports and there's lots of political pressure being put on the platforms to take down propaganda, potentially you might get a result. So,
and even if you don't want to do that, just think before you share. Even that little step will make a difference.
Yeah.
So, okay. So, first two topics were a bit
depressing,
negative, and yeah, it's unfortunate. I mean, it's hard because we said, we say we don't have any of those issues to worry about. You've got people who are literally locked down and don't have food and water and all of that. So it is difficult to talk about these things sometimes and realize there are people like that. So my wishes, I hope they all make it out safe and it ends soon. That's my hope. On to the next topic, which is October. What happens in October? I don't know. I can't remember.
I don't know. Something happens and like people use inappropriate hashtags. I can't remember what it was though.
Happy October. Security Awareness Month. Or Cyber Security Month, or whatever the heck you call it.
Everyone's super excited, I can tell. Everyone on the call, on the video very excited to talk about Cybersecurity Awareness Month. But I think there's some really interesting questions to talk about, and lots of people put these questions to us. So all of the questions we discussed tonight basically has come from the community. And this was another one that came from the community about whether or not, I guess it's worth it to invest much time and effort into it, or whether we should pay loads of attention to it. Is it kind of a bit of a dead stick? I mean, I know the European one, they've sort of said we're not doing as big of a thing because this should be something that should be year round. So I don't know. What do you think?
It's a hard one. I can see arguments for and against it. I do get it. It's a year-round thing. But at the same time, I think cybersecurity for the normies, we're using this term quite a bit tonight, is something that many don't think about. And to them, it's someone else's problem. I don't need to worry about it. And so on and so forth. So trying to make them aware that it's a thing that you do need to worry about is really important. You also have to consider, like, okay, you do it in 1 year. People come and go in the company. So 1 year is a long time in the company. You'll have a load of new people who may have never experienced this stuff before. So they need to get exposure to this. I think if done correctly, though, that's the key. You got to do it correctly. And by that is make it engaging, not, oh, here's a 1,000 PowerPoint slides. I think, no, it was Slack. Oh, I can't believe this. I don't know if it was cybersecurity, though. Apparently, they were closing down for a week, like stopping work for a week to do training for an entire week. I'm pretty sure it was Slack. So if I'm wrong, please someone correct me. But I'm pretty sure it was Slack. Like the CEO just said, we're stopping all work for a week. We're going to do the training. I don't know if that was like, I don't think it was just cybersecurity, but even still, like things like that, probably not going to get you a lot of favors. Making it more engaging, not just death by PowerPoints. And I think one of the really, really, really important things, and things I really enjoy doing, is gearing it towards more on a personal level. So this is how it impacts you. So if take email, for example, take your corporate email out of the context. You and the person, personal level, don't click on these links because it could be a phishing attack. They go grab all your credit card details and empty your bank account, or your home retail, or whatever. Start tackling those kinds of things. And what you'll find is people will be a lot more engaged. Don't know about you, but I care about my bank account far more than my company's bank account. Still care about my company's bank account.
My company's bank account and my bank account, the same bank account.
you separate. But the point is, like, people are going to care about their own things far more than a company's things. Like, if my computer got hacked into, that's going to be far more impactful to me than my work computer. So to me, that's going to mean a lot more, or should mean a lot more. So if you target those people like that, then they'll have better security hygiene at home, and that should hopefully carry over into work as well, because it's just something they do. That's my thinking behind it. So if you start tackling things like that, it also should hopefully get home a bit more rather than those PowerPoint slides.
I sort of agree. I mean, I do agree. In my experience, so I have some clients who bring me in as a speaker for Cybersecurity Awareness Month. What I find, and then this is coming from a speaker perspective, that works really, really well, is when the client has done some work during the year to identify gaps and sort of say, okay, the big problems we have are reporting, people losing passes, people losing like whatever the big problems are. And then that guides your content. So ignore the themes, ignore this stuff that's created by some external whatever. Focus on your organization. Where is your culture doing really well? Where are the gaps? And then use that to drive content in the month to boost it. But I think, as so many people have said in the chat, the problem with these awareness months is we're looking at this from a cyber perspective, but there's so many awareness months for so many different causes, none of which are more or less important than cyber in the grand scheme of things. And there's a fatigue, like, how do you make it different? How do you make it impactful? Okay, so people come along to a talk, then what? If you're not backing that up during the year, then I think it is probably a waste of money, to be honest. However good the speakers are that have come in, I think it's a waste of money if you're not backing that up with other stuff.
I have a solution. You're going to absolutely love it.
Oh, God.
We don't have a cybersecurity month. We have a cybersecurity year. This is the year of cybersecurity.
No. I don't have enough sleeping tablets for that. Sorry. No, I can't cope with that.
Yeah, I could see that going down really well.
Everybody who's on, vote in the chat, yes or no. Do you want cybersecurity awareness year or not?
I'm probably going to go yes and blame it on me. It's the worst idea ever. But anyway, no, it is a good point about like the different months. No one said yes. That's it. No, I'm joking. I'm relieved.
Sensible. They're really sensible people.
Yeah, I think one of the things is, as people mentioned, is there's so many on, as you rightly so. Oh God, Sentry, no. No. I quit. I'm going to go find an island somewhere.
That's fine. That's fine. Sentry's fine, but only at the end of our careers, not now. We've still got a few more years that we have to cope with that.
But yeah,
every day should be cybersecurity awareness.
Right.
Oh my God, that needs to be a t-shirt. That needs to be made into a t-shirt.
Can we show that? There we go. There we go. Put it on there. Oh my gosh.
No, please make it not happen.
Yeah, let's not do that. There are valid points about it being like fatigue and that, and heck, I'm even fatigued by it. I'm not. I've certainly noticed a massive difference this year in terms of cybersecurity month. No one's mentioned anything.
Yeah, I do too. It's much lower.
Like nothing. I've seen maybe a couple of posts. That's about it. Yeah. So if we're getting fatigued, then hell. Everyone else is like, yeah, I'm done. I don't know what the answer is.
So the other thing that I think with regards, this is sort of less about cybersecurity awareness month per se and more about just generally. If it was working, we would be seeing a change in the attackers' strategies because their current strategies would no longer be working. That isn't happening. So in my opinion, what that tells us is the current approach, by and large, to awareness is just not working. Because if it was, we would see data that would back that up, which we are not seeing. So, still big, huge companies with tons of money and resourcing are getting taken down by very basic social engineering attacks, are being taken down by phishing email. People are using absolutely terrible authentication, passwords and things like this. So it's obviously not working, but yet we keep redoing the same thing. And I forget the quote. There's like some Einstein quote about bashing your head against a brick wall or something.
That's actually, so it's Einstein's repeating the same thing over and over and expecting different results as the heart of insanity. It's actually misattributed to Einstein.
Oh,
bit of trivia.
Bit of misinformation going on there.
No, yeah, indeed. He did say it, but it didn't originate. Like it came way far prior to him. Everyone attributes it to him. But it is true. He repeated the same thing and then expecting different results. And I'm shocked. It didn't work again. Why?
Exactly. And I have loads of friends who are normies who don't remember their passwords, who refuse to use MFA because it's problematic. They don't do updates because they think that's how the government spies on you. They're investing in crypto projects that they have no idea what's going on. So in that respect, I'm like, well, I mean, none of our messaging is getting through or being received and properly understood because this problem shouldn't be persisting in this way. But I think there's loads of really good comments that are coming up that I'm kind of missing because I'm talking and talking and talking.
So I know there was this one, which was quite a good one. Just have cybersecurity. So I'm trying to read it.
Yeah, I think this is right.
So as far as I know, interestingly, cybersecurity, I think the term's just been totally meshed up. I was under the impression like cybersecurity was everything. It's not. Apparently, cybersecurity, and again, misinformation. So please go look this up and validate what I'm saying. I always got to second guess myself when we talk about misinformation. Is cybersecurity is focused on the web aspect, so it's not going to take into account things like physical security or locking your monitors and that kind of stuff. Information security is the wider thing. So cybersecurity is a subset of information security. That is my understanding of it. I could be completely wrong. If you know better, please comment. But that's my understanding because a while ago I got corrected on that, and I was like, oh, okay. But it's a very good point. Like, semantics and wording is very important. Otherwise, we just end up with confusion. What else? It's become, so there's this one, yep. I mean, this is very valid as well. It's become normalized. So people are kind of no longer taken by big breaches. Oh, my account details got compromised. Well, it's another day in the office kind of thing.
So I saw a really interesting stat that said, I was researching for a talk I was doing, and they said that 1.4 billion social media accounts get hacked every month. But what was more interesting was of those, 26% have had multiple times their account hacked, which tells you a couple of really interesting things that I'm pretty sure everybody on this video can deduce themselves because you're more than intelligent enough. But it's very interesting that there are these that number is 26% of those have had it at least once before.
So basically 1 in 4.
Yeah,
I can do maths. I had to second guess there for a second, like, is it 1 in 5 or 1 in... thank goodness I did pass. Just there's another one here from Mark. Yeah, we've known each other for a while. And yeah, we've been banging on about the same topics over and over. I think one thing is clear is if you manage to crack this nut, you'll make yourself a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of money.
Yeah.
So get your thinking caps on.
Yeah, there's like 3 problems that we've brought to you today that we haven't solved and that we're expecting you all to solve. Go. Fix it all.
We want royalty fees.
We do, because we initiated this, so we want our cut of whatever you make from wherever.
No, it's a difficult one. It's one that I think we all have frustrations dealing with. I know I deal with it quite a bit, especially I think the most challenging sometimes is working with development teams in that because they're so technical. They rightly or wrongly sometimes think they know better or know things or just put it off or whatever. And it's not just them, but yeah, it's difficult. It's challenging. And our job is to try help them see the lights, but also help them where they might misstep and pick them up and show them the right way.
And I think you've also got to appreciate the realities of business, because cyber people generally, we overall as a community, we're terrible at that. We have to acknowledge our flaws, and that's definitely one of them. And so one of the things that I've realized talking, because obviously I go into companies and run these exercises and preparedness things. And so I'm sitting there with their C-suite. And when you listen to them talk, you realize, like, when you say the GDPR fine, they don't care about that. They're like, oh, it's okay, we've got this pot of money aside for fines, so we'll pay it out of the that's fine. Lawsuit, oh, we're not already the rules to handle that, we'll handle this. What they care about is what is the sort of things that you need to find out, pick on, and then drive home, which comes back to your point about making it personal to the staff, right? What do they actually care about? And then make your message fit that. Don't expect that your message can be left in its entirety and suddenly people will care, because funnily enough, nobody outside of this group of individuals cares about cybersecurity at all. So we have to kind of acknowledge that and adapt the message, which is why I always think actually some of the best skill sets for people to get in cyber is to go and do a marketing course, learn how you would market an idea to a group of individuals, because I think that could be really valuable.
Can we also get those marketing people or those courses available for some of the cybersecurity service marketing stuff out there at the moment, which is absolute BS? Some of those people might need some lessons on how to properly market a product.
I think they're beyond help. Some of them are definitely beyond help.
Yeah. Reputational harm for Mark is also, it is a really important one, but I think sometimes it loses the value. Go look at the likes of Equifax and that, and then go to a company and go, yeah, you're going to lose reputation. I think, yeah, you're going to see the dip and then it picks up. I think where reputational harm really matters is how big your company is. If you can ride that wave out, they're not going to really care. If you're a smaller company, that's where you'll probably be hammered. That's where you'll suffer those losses significant enough that you don't have enough to ride out that initial whack from the reputational damage.
I think it's also the market in which you operate, right? Because I think it's the market in which you operate in as well. Because if, for example, you're Adobe, you don't really have competitors. So if someone takes you out and you've been really negligent, yeah, sure, there's reputational damage, but no one's leaving you because you're Adobe and no one has got many other alternatives. So I think the market really dictates it as well. Like if people have loads of choice and you've got loads of competitors, it could be really harmful. If you haven't really got any competitors, then people don't have another choice. So I think you're fine.
Also, people become very complacent. They initially like, oh, I mean, I do this all the time. Oh, I'm going to leave them. I'm going to do this. And then a week later, did you leave them? No. I haven't got around to it yet.
Uber. I mean, the list of things I've said that about and then not done it.
Yeah, it's just convenient. Like Uber's a good one. Like, yeah, you could not use them, but it's just like, it's a pain. So I'm just going to put up with it. I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but that's reality. Like people have a very short-term memory and around these kinds of things, and they just put up with it. And I think the kind of cynic in me always says companies like this know that, so that's why they get away with it.
Yeah, and I think it's the same as the social media platforms. I hate Meta with an absolute passion. I really hate them, and I hate a lot of the stuff they've done. Yet I use WhatsApp, I use Threads, I use Instagram, I use Facebook. You know, most of us on this call, we hate what Elon's done to Twitter. I think everyone pretty much on this call is on Twitter. So, I mean, yeah.
So what you're saying is we're all hypocrites.
We're all hypocrites. We just need to own the hypocrisy of it all and move on with our lives and start solving other problems.
Yeah. Yeah, it is very true. But yeah, actually, we're on time as well. Wow.
God. And we haven't had any.
This is not right.
This is a dream.
Okay, well,
this isn't real.
Yeah, I was about to say that at the beginning, and I was like, better not say that. So, especially my computer and my mic and that. I think I finally got my setup okay, where it's working without glitching or anything. I say fingers crossed.
Yeah, well, we'll see.
But yeah, thank you for everyone joining in and chiming in with the comments and listening in. Really great to have you. Some great points and comments and questions made. Yeah, and thanks to Lisa as well for her time and being far more organized than me.
For once.
Exactly.
For once. Everyone's witnessed this level of organization that I've had today. Okay, we don't need to go into this. Oh, here we go.
Yeah. That one. I don't think it's going to happen.
I'm actually genuinely surprised that Nikki Webb did not send me a pizza with pineapple. Because when I saw that today, I thought, it's a real shame she knows my address. It's a real pity.
What?
But yeah.
This is hey,
you will never get my address for this exact reason. So
don't you have to put your address for company house?
I don't know actually. Check that. I'm moving.
No, I don't know your address. And I probably won't ever find out. But that's good.
Yeah.
Damn it.
But thanks everyone for coming. I really appreciate it. And I appreciate all the comments. There's some really good, amazing comments on here, some of which I'm ignoring all the rest of these ones now because now it's descended into just a hate mob against me. But hey ho, that's what happens. That's what you get.
Come on, people spend an hour waiting. That's the entire reason for coming.
Every time at the end of the podcast, I just get trolled. Like everyone's sort of having this really healthy debate, and then at the very end, it descends into just trolling me about pineapple on pizza. This is like a pastime now.
Well, there's an easy way to end that.
Yeah, hit leave.
All right. Thanks all. Have a good one. Stay safe and yeah, have a good one. See you all later.
Bye.
Bye.